Clara Rose came to Wyoming seeking a new beginning, but was cruelly rejected by James McGinnis for being too beautiful to trust. In a town where gossip whispered louder than truth, even a hardened rancher like James believed the worst without ever giving her a chance. But fate had its own plans, forcing him to see the strength and courage hidden behind Clara's quiet resilience. And just wait until you see how this stubborn cowboy's heart was finally shattered, and why true justice and true love won the day. When James McGinnis, a hardened loner and the stubborn owner of a remote Wyoming ranch, finally decided to send for a mail order bride, he knew exactly what he was looking for. Someone plain, hardworking, uncomplicated, someone whose presence wouldn't twist his life into knots. James had learned the hard way. Beauty was dangerous. It attracted trouble the way a lantern pulled in moths, and eventually it burned. Once a woman's pretty face had cost him nearly everything: his land, his trust, and the little peace he'd scraped together. He'd sworn on cold winter nights and blistering summer days that he would never again be fooled by a beautiful face hiding an empty heart. So, when Clara Rose stepped off the dusty coach at the station, glowing like the sun itself, James froze. Even the old-timers who rarely looked up from their worn checkers boards turned their heads. Ranch hands whistled low. Storekeepers stared through their windows. Clara didn't just walk. She floated, her honey blonde hair catching the light, her dress simple but doing nothing to hide her natural grace. James's chest tightened. She was too beautiful. Far, far too beautiful. Before she could even spot him, before a single word could pass between them, James marched across the cracked platform boards, jaw locked tight, boots heavy with each step. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't tip his hat. Instead, he stopped a few feet from her, his voice cold and flat. "You're not what I ordered. Find yourself another, fool." The words landed like stones between them. Clara blinked once, not in shock, not in outrage, but in something quieter, something infinitely sadder. For just a heartbeat, her delicate features faltered. The hurt was there, flickering like a candle fighting the wind. But then she lifted her chin with a grace that had nothing to do with her looks, and everything to do with the steel hidden inside her. "As you wish, Mr. McGinnis," she said, her voice steady and soft. "I'll manage." And she turned away without another word, her back straight, her footsteps measured, leaving the crowd murmuring behind her. James stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling something twist unexpectedly deep in his gut. Not guilt, not regret, intrigue. She hadn't begged. She hadn't wept or clung or made a scene, the way he'd half expected. She had simply accepted his cruelty and walked away with her dignity untouched. And that, somehow, was more dangerous than all the pretty faces he'd ever known. Clara found shelter at the modest farmhouse of Mildred Harper, the only woman in the county who still believed a kind heart was worth more than any outward beauty. Mildred had seen too many pretty faces come and go, chasing city dreams or rich husbands. But she looked into Clara's tired eyes and saw something different. A spirit worn, thin, but not broken. Clara worked quietly and without complaint. She milked cows before dawn, her delicate hands strong and steady despite the chill of morning. She scrubbed floors until they shone, chopped wood for the stove, and spent her evenings teaching little May Harper to read from the worn Bible by lamplight. The town, however, wasn't as quick to forgive her beauty. Men watched her too long. Women whispered behind cupped hands. Even the preacher's wife crossed the street to avoid her, murmuring to her friends that no woman that lovely could be up to any good. And James couldn't look away. Every time he rode past the Harper farm, he caught himself slowing down. He'd tell himself he was checking the fences, or the weather, or the state of the road. But deep down, he knew the truth. It was her. The way her golden hair caught the sun like a halo. The way her laughter rang out, free and unguarded, when little May clumsily tried to catch a wayward chicken. The way her small, calloused hands gripped the heavy water buckets as if she'd been born to this hard life, not some polished life of silk and parasols. Each time he watched her, something twisted tighter inside him, a mix of anger, confusion, and something far more dangerous, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Blast it! She's real, he thought, pulling hard on the reins as if trying to drag himself away. And that made it worse, because the walls he had so carefully built around his heart, stone by stone, crack by crack, began to tremble just at the thought of her. It all came to a head one blistering Saturday afternoon. Clara was riding the Harpers' old mare along the dried-up creek bed when the horse suddenly spooked, rearing back and taking off at a wild, uncontrolled gallop straight toward the jagged rocks beyond. James saw it happen before anyone else. Without thinking, without hesitating, he kicked his own horse into motion, the world narrowing down to one single, urgent point. Get to her. The chase lasted only seconds, but it burned itself into his memory forever. James caught up, grabbed the mare's bridle with one strong hand, and wrenched the animal to a sliding, shuddering halt, his boots digging deep into the dust. Clara, shaken and pale, clung to the saddle for a moment before he reached up, steady and sure, and helped her down. For the first time, they stood close enough to truly see each other. Her face was flushed, strands of hair plastered against her forehead, her chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow breaths. And in her wide, shining eyes, he saw it all. The fear she fought to hide, the exhaustion she bore alone, and beneath it, something he hadn't expected, a fierce, aching tenderness, a stubborn hope she refused to let the world crush. James felt the ground shift under his boots. She wasn't a danger to him because of her beauty. She was a danger because she was real, in all the ways that mattered. And for the first time in many, many years, James McGinnis wasn't sure he could walk away. After that day by the dried creek, something shifted inside James McGinnis, something he couldn't silence no matter how hard he tried. He found himself noticing the smallest things about Clara, the way her jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, whenever townsfolk muttered behind her back, words they thought she couldn't hear. The way she took on back-breaking work without a word of complaint, hauling water, mending fences, pulling weeds until her hands were raw as if trying to prove she belonged. And the way she sat alone on the Harper porch after sunset, her slim figure still and silent against the deepening blue of the sky, staring into the emptiness as if searching for something she couldn't quite reach. She never asked for help. She never demanded sympathy. She simply carried her burdens, quietly, stubbornly, as if the whole world expected her to fail, and she had decided she would not give them the satisfaction. One evening, long after the last colors had bled from the sky, James passed by the Harper farm on his way back from the northern pastures. He might have kept riding, convincing himself there was no reason to stop, but something made him slow down. A flicker of movement in the open barn, a soft, broken sound carried on the breeze. He dismounted, leaving his horse tethered to the gate, and walked towards the barn with slow, uncertain steps. Inside, the shadows swallowed everything but her. Clara sat on an overturned crate, her head bowed, shoulders trembling with silent sobs she fought to hide even here, in the darkness where no one should have seen. For a moment, James could only stand there, frozen by the rawness of it. She was always so composed, so strong. Seeing her undone like this struck something deep inside him, something he didn't have a name for. He cleared his throat, the sound rough and awkward in the stillness. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, his voice lower than he intended. Clara startled, quickly wiping at her cheeks with the sleeve of her worn dress. She didn't look at him right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost brittle. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Tired of proving I'm more than a face. Tired of fighting for a place that never wanted me." James walked closer, every instinct warring inside him. To run, to say something, to do nothing. Instead, he slowly lowered himself onto the crate beside her, his movements careful, as if afraid to spook a wounded animal. For a long moment they sat in silence, broken only by the soft rustle of the wind through the open barn doors. Then, his voice rough but steady, James said, "You've already proven it, to anyone who knows how to see." Clara turned her head, just enough for him to catch the shimmer of fresh tears in her eyes. But there was something else there, too, a faint, tentative spark of belief, so fragile it almost broke him. And right then James felt it. The brittle shell he had built around his heart, the fortress of old hurts and hard lessons, cracked clean through. Because sitting beside him wasn't just a beautiful woman, it was a soul stitched together with quiet strength and stubborn hope. A woman who had faced 1,000 silent battles without ever asking for rescue. And for the first time in a long, long while, James McGinnis realized something terrifying and undeniable. He didn't want to walk away. The next day, the entire town gathered in the open field behind the church to celebrate the harvest. There were tables heavy with food, children chasing each other between hay bales, and musicians tuning their fiddles under the bright Wyoming sun. Laughter and conversation buzzed in the air like bees. But even among all the noise, James McGinnis stood out, a solitary figure, stiff and silent near the edge of the crowd, until he moved. Without a word to anyone, James walked forward, boots kicking up dust, every pair of eyes slowly turning to follow him. The farmers fell silent. The sheriff lowered his cup of cider. The storekeeper froze mid-bite of his pie. Even Pastor Whitmore stopped speaking. His hand paused above the good book. James crossed the field with the same steady determination he brought to everything. Only this time, he wasn't facing a storm or a broken fence. He was facing something far more dangerous. He stopped in front of Clara, who had been standing near the Harper table, her hands folded neatly in front of her, her simple blue dress catching the breeze. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The world seemed to hush, waiting. Then James extended his hand, his voice carrying clear and low across the stunned gathering. Will you marry me?" A ripple of astonishment moved through the crowd. Everyone knew James McGinnis, hard as granite, distant as the mountains. He wasn't a man who made speeches. He wasn't a man who bent. And he certainly wasn't a man who let his heart lead his actions. Clara stared at him wide-eyed, her fingers trembling where they clutched the folds of her skirt. For a long, breathless moment she said nothing. In her eyes, those deep, aching eyes, tears gathered. Not tears of sadness, not tears of fear, tears of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she could be seen for who she truly was. Slowly, with a soft, breaking smile, she placed her hand in his. "Yes, James," she whispered. A murmur swept through the crowd, but James barely heard it. He lifted her hand gently to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with a reverence that shook even the hardest hearts watching. He didn't care who saw. He didn't care what was said. All the walls he had spent a lifetime building around himself crumbled in that one simple, public act. And everyone there, every farmer, every merchant, every sharp-eyed gossip, understood. The cold, unshakable man they thought would die alone had finally found the one thing he feared most and needed most: love. And for James, and for Clara, and for the little town that had forgotten the power of second chances, a new story began that day, a story without fear, without judgment, only love.